Good morning, everyone. This is Francis, Martin, and Curt for the Natural Institute. This is our office hours Q&A for February 20th, what year is it? 2026, right?
Six.
Yeah, is that right? Am I right? Okay.
No knows
Um, what's that? What's that, Mark?
no knows at this point.
Yeah. um, the way that works is that down in the comments we leave a link to where you can submit your questions. You submit them. Uh, Martin, I believe, gives them an audit pass, but I guess most of them are passed these days, right? Yes.
I have
And
not seen
then
any right in the beginning. I've seen some weird questions just from what do you call them? The none too good to do's on the internet or whatnot.
yeah,
I have
near to
not
well.
seen any for at least a while, 2 years, more or less.
So then Francis reads them. Martin does his thing, and I add color and detail. Um, so let's proceed. I gotta heat some coffee. All right. All
All
right.
right,
Let's get on. What? Go ahead.
let's go with question one from Suki. Should college and universities allow individuals to get a degree or certificate via paid exam to assess the individual's competence? And this way, a self-taught autodidact can be tested and awarded a degree or certificate without having to attend college.
Well, of course, at least assuming nothing else changes that would render that unnecessary.
To the words that render what unnecessary.
Well, I can imagine larger scale changes that would completely restructure education system where this wouldn't make sense anymore.
hmm Just for just for because it's possible in Europe. Um, their system is in some countries is different. You can, in fact, um, uh, sign up for a PhD and do the work yourself, and then all you have to do is pass the what do you call it?
Dissertation?
What?
Dissertation? The PhD
No,
dissertation?
you can give the dissertation, but you have to pass the interview. When that interview, I can't remember the name they call it. I just woke up. It's basically where you're confronted with a panel. They ask you questions and see if you actually
The
know what you're talking.
exams?
Yeah.
What, Mark?
The exams?
No, it's actually it's like being before a panel of judges,
That's
right?
the oral argument in a dissertation, right? I mean,
Right.
that's a dissertation is what you write, but then
Yeah.
you got to present it.
So that's the closest we have. I'm not in favor of tests, uh, and because there are, as we've seen around the world, they're too easy to fudge. Um, does that mean that? But if you're going to do that, but I do believe the dissertation uh, and I can't remember what the name of the world is called. I'll look it up. Um, uh, I think that process does seem to work. There aren't that many colleges that do it, but Oxford's one of them. Um, it's not. It does happen in the United States where someone will come to a university um, uh, with a dissertation already composed, but I've never heard about it being not in need of revision. But I have heard of it working fairly quickly. I mean, let me tell you how it messes with the economics. The reason you want dissertations, you want PhD students, is slave labor.
Yeah.
And to some degree, the way the U.S. gets, we have a higher standard of living and a pretty good quality of life and pretty good universities. but we can bring people from around the world uh, who can borrow the money somehow to be able to pay for being slave labor for X number of years for while they get their PhD. And so to some degree, that's international subsidy of our research and development. Um, so there's been movements to correct that, but it's very hard to overcome, especially when you can get uh, especially when you can get that labor from people who will actually do quite a bit of work. So we'll see. I think
Well, not only PhD but also postdocs, right? It's my cousin
oh yeah,
who studied
absolutely.
pharmaceuticals, I think in Singapore or something. After coming to the States, got her doctorate, and even in postdocs, she worked for a number of years before finally getting her own professorship, and now she can lord over a bunch of doctors and PhD and postdoc students to do free research. And she was complaining because of Trump's tariffs or whatnot that the number of such student applicants that dropped down.
Well, so the flip side is that we produce more PhDs than can be absorbed by the economy and the academy. And the question is always, are these PhDs worth the what we're attesting, right? Um,
In what sense?
you can. I remember when I was quite young. I must have been 20 or something like that. And because I was in the art business, I ran into a lot of artists. And a woman I met had got a PhD in the language of the Lilliputians. Now, of course, this is a humanities PhD, right, which is always questionable in the first place. And the Lilliputians um, are the antagonists, the little people in Gulliver's Travels, the
Mm-hmm.
novel, the Gulliver's
Mm-hmm.
Travels. And I'm like, why do you get a PhD in that? I mean, I don't. Why do we even issue one? Because, and I'm talking to her about it, and I realize she's fucking crazy. I mean,
Jesus
there's no
Christ.
two ways about it, right? Only a crazy person would pick that. And what she did was, and the way she talked, she was crazy. So I'm like, okay, but we have the same problem with a lot of. It's not as bad as it was when I think in the 70s, but um, but there's it's very hard to understand why we have PhD programs when at schools who are not in the upper 10% was right of students. Anyway, that's my sort of criticism of it. It's just like I meet I hire a bunch and most of the time because I'm hiring people who have something like statistical degrees. They're pretty useful. It's pretty good, but there still is. You're not going to have that many teachers, and as Martin alluded a minute ago, the reality is that the return on college is decreasing because we've put too many people through it.
Mm-hmm.
There's things that always are going to need any kind of mathematics, mathematically found, even programming. These things take time, right, to do well, and of course there's a filtering process to it. But for a lot of things, there's almost no value in the college education other than 4 years of vacation.
That's what these colleges are nowadays designed to do. It's like 4 years of advanced daycare.
Oh, it says daycare with possibility of sex. I mean, it's the other.
Yes, I wasn't gonna go there, but you went there first.
I
Who
Yeah.
said daycare doesn't have that possibility?
Martin. It's bad enough what I said, and then you got to go take it all away. All right, Christ. All right, all right, all right.
Well,
We kill that one.
I think a
Or-
much better incentive would be if companies were expected to directly contribute to education that they require.
Mhm.
Either teach the skills directly via some kind
Well,
of
they do already.
apprenticeship.
That's the
Yeah.
problem, right? They actually do. But but for the privilege, you got to rack up $100,000 of the debt. That's what's wrong.
Oh, what
Yeah,
competence?
then demand that they contribute to it, and that was peer pressure for them to only actually demand the skills that will be used in the work.
All right. So college is going through its not so good phase. We'll see what happens.
No, I mean
All right. What's next?
the way I look at it is just supply and demand, right? There's too much, what is it? Too much supply right now in terms of colleges, and the demand shortfall is being made up by foreign students. Once the American-led globalization order falls away, there's going to be, just like any market, you're going to get a demand shortfall or supply shortfall,
Mm-hmm.
and then demand is going to have to. Sorry, this should be the other end. The demand is the students, and the supply is the colleges. You're going to get a demand shortfall, and colleges will have to adjust. All right, shall we move on?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, question 2. How would you maximize fluid intelligence prior to reaching early adulthood?
I'd first ask what you're trying to achieve. Yes, you can make it smarter in a way that will show up on intelligence tests, but the only thing you've done is accelerate how fast they reach their genetic potential, but you're not going to raise it. This is why adult intelligence is much more hereditary. But as for the answer, I suppose teaching them logic and letting them solve problems at their current capacity.
Yeah. Martin's right, of course. There's the problem is you're saying fluid intelligence, and that's not good. You're not going to help that. What you will do is crystallized intelligence, which is again what Martin is saying, which is that you can actually teach a person very useful things. And so their demonstrated intelligence, the output of their natural ability, their fluid intelligence, and their learned ability, crystallized intelligence, will produce demonstrated intelligence. However, again, Martin is correct. The reality is that the advantage will dissipate over time. So because you're not and this is partly to do with things that we're taught are things that are testable, but the way we make success in the world is not by things that are testable. It's by the fact that there isn't closure. In other words, the world is full of things that are only testable by doing them. And so I don't like to pick on tests because they do tell us something. But the point is, you can become better. You can develop more crystallized knowledge. Yeah, you can, and you can do better on tests. But over time, you're going to have a genetic expression. There's no way around it. The flip side of the argument is the opposite, which is it's sort of like the parenting argument. You can screw your kids up, but you can't necessarily make them that much better. So the trick is not to screw them up too much. It's the same thing with intelligence. The best thing you can do is sleep, exercise, and a decent diet, and so that they're most capable of learning. Sleep, exercise, and decent diet. Yes, that's correct. But so Martin's general argument is you can push early development toward the sort of feasibility envelope, or the space where you can that is most practical for you, but you can't really do much about it. I'm going to see if I have any notes here. Yeah, sleep, fitness, and avoid things that are bad for you. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
I
All right.
do think environment actually matters for kids, but it's not so much about parenting, but about their peers and about status hierarchies.
Yes,
And you can have some control over that as a parent
that's
by
correct.
choosing which peers they end up with.
I remember getting a talk from my parents about who I'm allowed to hang out with. I found that I reacted very viciously against it. It's like my fucking choice. But the reality is that it sunk in. It sunk in. And this is, I just lived in this small town, and there's the normal class hierarchy in it.
It's better to live somewhere where the terrible options are not available.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right.
All right, moving on to question 3. Curt and Martin, much of what I am seeing between the relationship between the EU and US are deep indications of a fracture of the Western world, one that is as dramatic as a fracture of the continental Germanics and the Anglos and the Saxons who had successfully rooted in the Isles. Cultural, economic, military needs and strategies are no longer mutually beneficial, and at this moment seems to be a deep source of friction. England and Germany are abandoning their legalistic tradition, ending jury trials, while the USA maintains theirs, albeit in a degraded condition. My question is, are you sensing the same thing? And if so, is this a good and necessary outcome? Is it inevitable and neutral? And please pontificate.
I see the fracture as necessary for healing. I've come to realize that Spengler was wrong, that Anglosphere and continental Europe are not the same Faustian civilization. And it only seems that way because the latter has spent a century in submission, and this relationship was only beneficial precisely because that sovereignty was bought off at the time with access to material riches and freedom from traditional obligations. In other words, archetypical deal with the devil.
I expect you to go on longer than that.
We've been over this so many times.
Yeah, when I saw question 3, I thought, well, here's another rabbit hole that we can spend an hour and a half on
It's always the same rabbit hole.
that
We're
you
not
two
gonna
keep on
find
falling into.
All right.
If we
So
haven't found the
I'm going to
rabbit
take
by
a
now, he's not there.
I'm going to take a slightly different tack on this one. And because I posted something from George Friedman on this, and I thought his insight was the way he framed it, more than an insight, was quite good. The Anglosphere is a lot of big places, right? You got so you have at least the UK, the USA, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, right? I mean, there's a frontierness about those places, right? That's true, and there's also the fact that they're naval. But what Friedman said is that Europe is an illusion. It's a continent, but on that continent there are 50 some odd states, or 50, I don't know, something like that, states, right? Many of whom have fought each other to the death repeatedly throughout history. And there are at least 3 macro sub-civilizations, right? You have the Germanic, the northern ones, you have the Latin, the southern ones, you have the Balto-Slavic, the eastern ones, and If you want to count them in, you have the Russians. And then at the bottom there, you have the old Europeans, which are always a question. Um, and so the idea that you could create a United States out of that group, which was the French idea, right, it was a mistake. And so besides the inability to import a naval civilization's strategy into a continental civilization, you have the problem of the problem of it's not a problem, the virtue of long-standing cultural differences, and actually they're not only culture, they're just genetic differences in this climb. And so I would say that the problem is treating Europe and EU and Europe an a, as a thing rather than 50 different nations with different uh, peoples with different heritages that are fairly adamant about preserving those heritages, and that means that without having the moderator of the Anglosphere, all right, as taking on the role of defense and somewhat um, the what do you call it, the strategic positioning, that that those that without having that, the polity will gravitate to its normal historical position as relatively incompatible, which Martin, I think, tries to illustrate that. So uh, I would argue that the same thing is happening in the United States by the great sort, is that we are sorting into populations that are more classic sub-civilizational interests, and that the only thing that's prohibiting it is the degree uh, of unwanted immigration, which is actually forming a competitor to that sortition. So in the end, I think that it is natural for the European people to aggregate for defense, but disaggregate for expression. And if we look at what we've done in volume one so far, that is actually the pattern of history, which is there is a period where unification is better, and that tends to produce imperial periods. And there is a period of fragmentation, which is when now that everybody has reached similar standards under the imperial conditions or on the concentrated conditions, that there's advantage in additional self-determination to exploit the opportunities most beneficial for the group. So the net result that's my argument. The net result is that George's argument is that it's going to be almost impossible to govern the EU as anything other than a defense pact. Um,
I think
uh,
even that might be tricky when you have Germany that's reliant on Russian gas, and then you have Ukraine, which is two countries over, are fighting a war.
yeah, yeah. So the second thing is that uh, be, Martin's right. People value their cultures, right? And so if you have that, there's a resistance to submission. Now, even economically, it doesn't really make sense. France used to have a great manufacturing sector, but effectively got up and said,
Hmm.
"Whoa, if we got these policies, I'm going to go where people are cheap and the government isn't a pain in the ass." And so the industry moved to Poland. Poland's benefited heavily from it. I mean, they've got a, a government that does not like socialism or communism at all, and they've got a population that is wants to build a better life. So if you look at that, or if you, I mean, I can go across Europe and give this example by example. That's just the big one that's popular now because the French are experiencing the end of life of their fantasy. So I like how Martin says, I see the fracture is necessary for healing. I don't know what, I'm not sure. I think it's interesting that both sides are going through the betrayal, right? The Americans think that Europeans have betrayed them because they're free riding on them. And the Europeans like, you promised us security and now you're betraying us. And we're like, I mean, George said the same thing I said, which is, you're 34 years old, get out of the house and get a job, right?
But those are both symptoms of the same problem. Enforced
Oh, great.
dependence.
So, on the other hand, the U.S. acted out of self-interest in the post-war period. They wanted the Europe to be restored so they could help fight the spread of communism. And so the U.S. did all it could to do that, and Japan as well. Um, so it was not only Americans saw it not only as a practical utility, but as a cultural moral duty. But we have to remember that the Americans saw the Europeans as barbaric, war prone people, and that until the European suicide in the world wars, Europe was always a danger to America. So that flipped, and so it's one thing to look at these things with a moral lens, and it's another to look at it as what is necessary at the time. And unfortunately, the people got habituated to false security, and we see what we see today. So anyway,
Well, I
that's my
think
take on it.
once again, hindsight's 2020. This 34-year-old that's still living in the house, uh, you know, rewind 34 years from now, like back in the early 1990s, before they dismantled their Cold War structure, the
Yep,
United States, if George H.W. Bush was actually in power back then, could have just said, "Great, now that the war is over, we're going to dismantle this thing, and you guys still have essentially standing armies for Soviets, and now you're on your own."
that's right.
Before the World War II generation completely died off. Because back then, I guess the generals and so on, those in command are still from that generation.
That's right.
It's before the boomers took over.
Um,
Basically, it's us complaining about the guy not moving out of the house after you've spent decades prohibiting him moving out of the house.
Well, yeah, I mean,
what do
now
you
it's
mean
34
prohibit
years
them? What
later.
do you mean prohibit? There's no prohibit. There's no prohibit. There's bait, but there's no prohibit.
I'm gonna lean on Martin's side here. If you build up so much incentive to not have leave the house,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
it
yeah.
might as well
Okay,
be
okay. I'll go with
prohibitive
that
in
one.
reality.
I'll go with
Uh,
I'll go
uh,
with
what,
that. That's the right answer.
what would be the American response at any point if European countries said, well, Americans have 2 years to leave, these bases now belong to us, we'll remain here? and we'll start defending ourselves and our own strategic interests, regardless of how they relate to American interests.
I got a note here. Germany is not abandoning jury trials. Germany largely does not use Anglo-style juries. This is true. It's long relied on a mixed panel of judges, um, with jury trials abolished in the early 20th. Yeah, they're continental. Yep. Most, yeah. I don't I don't know how I feel. I'm see the difference is in America we are culturally predisposed to suspect the state in everything because of our founding principles, right? And it's more, and so the reality is that the continent is not. We've had anti-aristocratic shit going on here since our very beginning, and we have anti-authoritarian shit going on since our very beginning, and the continent isn't like that. It's like they still have the remnants of the authority, and for good reasons.
So you cannot build a stable civilization around saying "fuck you, Dad."
All right, around what?
Around saying "fuck you, Dad."
Well, it's more that you can't build a civilization when you're surrounded by opportunities for defection, right? Which is really your complaint, right? People can be baited into the hazard of defection against their culture. And so I agree with that. My argument would be, well, just write it down as a constant, in a constant, that this is a value, rather than don't articulate it. Yeah. All right. I don't have anything else smart to say here.
All right, let's move on before it descends into the rabbit hole. All right, question 4. What is
I get a lot of value out of Martin and mine disputes. I just don't think it's.
I get it.
I
They
just
also appear to be audience favorites.
say again.
That those arguments also appear to be audience favorites.
Yes.
How do you know? Did you do a poll?
Oh, because this lives in the world. He's in the
Oh, that's
social
right.
media side.
He's on Telegram channels.
He's the one who sees all the people.
All right, question 4. What is the best PhD to make money and contribute to science?
Two different things.
Okay.
If making money and contributing to science are two things that are often mutually exclusive. Um, the best PhD you can get is one where you can get a lot of people working for you who are capable of getting funding. I mean, that's
Right now, it's AI research.
yeah, it's just whatever the fuck you want. I was listening to Horowitz last night, who's his name, the guy who founded
Anderson Horowitz.
Anderson Horowitz. And he's like, well, it's a weird time because you can't learn this stuff in college, right? If you're not at one of the foundation model producers, there's no way to learn it. And so there's a scarcity of guys. I mean, absolute scarcity of guys.
Which is, I think, they get paid millions.
Yeah, get paid incredible amounts of money. I mean, I think he was saying what? There's 40 guys, right? I mean, I think that's the number he put out there. It's like there's not a lot of fields where there's only 40 guys, right? An infinite demand. So in any event, what's the best PhD? To contribute to science, I don't think it matters. Anything in the STEM from any branch of physics, chemistry, biology, the STEM courses are you can contribute to science. It's not actually that difficult to contribute. My argument is that the oversupply has made it hard to, if you're good, even if you're good, hard to get a position where you can contribute to science through that side. An awful lot of PhDs go into the commercial sector after trying to make it in the academy because they can simply make more money there. Um, but they're not going to make real money like you can with a STEM degree most of the time. So it is what it is. Um, uh, I think if I were at one point, it would have been very interesting to me to get a PhD in economics because if you're a heterodox economist, which is you're a bit of a contrarian, you can provide insights that are not accessible in the mainstream. So we've seen quite a few people in the we would consider the Austrian side of the spectrum, which is the heterodox spectrum, produce incredible books over the past couple of decades. Whereas we have not had people in the mainstream produce much of intellectual merit. So I thought that was going to be an interesting place to work. Um, but if you want to contribute to science, making money and contributing to science, that's hard. Um, and I wouldn't, and I'm not sure you ever, in most cases, the amount of money you spent getting that PhD will not be recovered in income.
So
Okay,
it's best not to get a PhD.
I'm sorry.
So it's best not to get a PhD.
Well, if you can be in the upper, 1.5% in your field, I think it's worth it to get your PhD. I think it's worth it to get your PhD if you're in a field that it's possible to do innovation that actually has some sort of merit. But I mean, I don't even know why we give PhDs out in the humanities. I don't, other than a PhD in the humanities is basically a license to teach it. But so I don't. Do I recommend it? Well, I mean, Shane is in the process of getting his, and he's working with our stuff on the ternary logic, triangles expressed in cognitive science. I think that's pretty good because he's going to be a net contributor to the field. So if you just want to get a PhD as a job ticket, that's different from getting a PhD because you have a deep interest in something that could contribute. And I'm just saying that getting a PhD in general looks like it's not the return that we thought it was, that people thought it would be.
I see.
Well, it's a bit like a lottery ticket. So I used to work with a principal engineer who did get a PhD in AI hardware.
Mm-hmm.
This is like he probably got his PhD, close to 15, 16 years ago, before like AI was even a thing. And after he got his PhD, started working at Google. And of course, the guy's very smart. Went from like level, I don't know, like a level 4 to easily a level 8, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
principal engineer level. That makes over $1 million a year easy in
Yep.
a few short years, and had a great career at Google. And a few years ago, when this AI stuff starts to pick up, he says, "Well, I'm going to return to my roots and continue my PhD and go work at this AI hardware startup." And who knows, what kind of money he's making now, just given NVIDIA could easily acquire that company for billions of dollars.
Right.
But then again, 20 years ago, did he know that AI is going to take off? No. Just like whatever some obscure PhD now, 20 years into the future, may take off. You just never know.
Well, but again, it's a STEM.
Yes,
Yeah,
something STEM, something that involves whether it's moving bits or moving atoms. Better if it's both.
Okay.
The best degree is still engineering, to make money. I know that sounds weird, but for an above average guy, the best degree is still engineering. The number of guys who have engineering degrees that run companies is surprising. I would say, in other words, they make real money making that stuff. If you're going to get a STEM degree, that's not hard. I'm really sort of poo-pooing the idea that there are returns on all PhDs degrees, and there aren't. There just aren't. On the other hand, I mean, if I had a PhD in economics right now, I would get personal psychological value out of it, right? And it would right. So from my standpoint, I have a anti-authoritarian streak that's pretty goddamn deep. What I say? So I had a disdain for the academic system, but that's actually hurt me today. I could, if I had any degree at all, any PhD at all, it would grant me access to being able to more range than I have as an independent. So.
Well, only because of the way that it's set up now.
Yeah.
So with my daughters, we've been reading a series of books on how things used to be. During the golden age of European discovery, all these gentlemen scientists and so on, almost none of them have. I mean, they're members of Royal Society or whatever the scientific society were. Now, almost none of them went through this formal PhD program, whatever the F we call it now, which is really entrance to a priesthood.
Yeah, I would. I read this research not too long. I mean, quite a while ago, and it's basically very clear that the number of very smart people in America has remained constant since about 1963. So all the additional PhDs we've produced, it's actually labor.
Lowering the bar.
Yes, you need labor to do research, right? Because the low-hanging fruit is sort of picked, but most of what we've done is add research labor to the pool, and the returns on it have not been proportional. It's still constant. There's only so many smart people in the fields. The big thing I've noticed is that in my generation, in the 80s, we went through hyper-financialization because of Reagan policies to defeat the Soviets with our economy. And so we threw way too many IQ points at the financial sector. And I knew this was going to be bad too. And it has had pretty harmful effects on us in a lot of ways. So that's been correcting since 2008. But, it's like people say, I'm going to get a law degree. I'm going to get a CPA degree. I'm going to get a doctor. I mean, being a doctor is fucking hard. So there's some sort of filter there, but you still are stuck with the Peter principle on one hand and the supply demand curve of a polity exceeding its human capital resources. In other words, its IQ distribution, because of circumstances that generate the wealth that make it possible. And we've seen this in Spain, right? We saw this in Spain. We've seen it in Rome, and we're seeing it in the West, especially in America. So
we've seen what specifically?
Um, when you get when a country gets wealthy enough, so
Mhm.
like Spain's capture of South American silver, right? Right.
There's a difference. The Spain got wealthy only in the monetary asset denomination sense. They didn't
Correct.
get wealthy in the Anglo-American sense, i.e., productivity.
Correct. So that's it's just the best example.
Hmm.
And really, the same thing happened in Athens. They built the Parthenon because they found a
Oh,
silver mine,
well, I don't know
right?
if they found a silver mine. Didn't they Didn't they basically steal their allies' gold from Delos or something?
That too, right? Right. And so we're getting at here is that if you create an environment where there's excess wealth, there's going to be excess mobility, and you're going to reach the Peter principle of incompetence.
Hmm.
Um, then if
In, investing it into building something beautiful is actually not a bad investment.
no,
If
it's
learn
actually a
it.
great investment. Um, so in any event, so that's the basic criticism. It's the same thing with a superheated economy. You can heat up an economy such the fact that you've essentially made it everyone in it incompetent, and that happens pretty often actually. I mean, Francis, I don't know if you remember 2001. Were you around for that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So 2001, I was like, you're calling yourself a tester?
Hmm.
You're calling yourself a developer? I wouldn't hire you to fucking, you know what I mean?
Oh, I mean,
And
I
it
know
was,
that even back in 1999 and in 2000, and we got.
yeah,
I was in college. I was a TA,
yeah,
and I saw people graduate standing on the same stage as me, who I tutored and couldn't rub two lines of code together to save their lives.
that's right, that's right, right. And so that's a common consequence. Um, and so there's a anyway. That, the, that's the recipe for having bad consequences is if you are starting to hit the Peter principle wall. On the other hand, you can institutionalize it as a mandate for failure by doing what we did, which is bureaucratize anything, right? Because the kind of people that want to work in a bureaucracy, it's not like China's bureaucracy, right? I mean, although China did go sideways eventually, the
Yeah,
problem
I
you
think the
get,
Chinese problem, that bureaucracy, the state apparatus is the problem.
yeah. So we have the problem today in that we used the government employment as a social program for a while, and it's like I always say, if you're in a coffee shop, you get that one bitchy chick. It sucks the dick of the management, excuse me, and keeps them informed and whatever. But what she does is she eventually causes all the good people to leave
Hmm.
who are good with the customers, and she brings in more bitchy people that she can control. And the quality of the service goes down. Same shit happens in bureaucracies. And so anything where upward approval is more effective than the customer service is always going to be the same problem. All right, have we killed this one?
When you
So
said
like,
that, I smiled because I've dealt with this problem so many years in these
Yeah,
outwardly unassailable big high tech companies, but it always
It
rots from within.
seems to me
yeah.
then that having eunuchs in management positions would be preferable because women couldn't get up there by sucking dick.
Oh
Hmm.
my God, that's brilliant. That's awful. Brilliant and
I
awful.
don't know. Eunuchs have
You
their
could,
own problems. I mean, my culture had plenty of eunuchs, and like problems in the downfalls of empires and so on are usually blamed on them.
so yeah, I think we could run with this one for a while.
Yeah.
So let's continue.
Excuse me. Not my country.
so Francis,
My civilization.
Charles, do you want to say something?
yeah. So like, was the computer science degree like more fake back in the day, or like less strenuous?
No, I wouldn't say it's. I don't know what it's
Oh,
like these days. I would say it's even more strenuous. Back
Oh,
when
yeah.
in my days, I had to learn a whole slew of programming languages. I had to learn how to code in what do you call it, assembly, and do some IC design, all that kind of things. In fact, I had to take engineering math, which was the only math class I've ever got a C in. Otherwise, I've straight A'd all my math classes. Engineering math was hard when it gets to Laplace. And yesterday, we actually just read about Maquis Laplace.
I learned assembler in high school.
Yeah, there you go.
Not that I remember any of it.
I bet
I
Curt still
remember
remembers some.
arithmetic shift left. I mean, I actually loved assembler because it made me understand the hardware so well. But
Hmm.
the productivity with it is zero. But on the other hand, I was in the early 1980s. I wrote a game, right? And it fit in like 64K,
Hmm.
right? It had its own graphics. It had its own font.
Super Mario.
What?
It was like Super Mario fit on 64K
It was
back when it
amazing.
was back when memory was very expensive. Although it seems like we're going back to those days because of AI.
Yeah, I've seen gamers complaining that they cannot afford graphics cards that they could afford earlier.
So we used to have the console effect, and now we have the AI effect,
Uh-huh.
equally putting caps on graphics cards.
It's like
What's a 3050 cost today? What's
A
the top?
3050 now, like the top is like a 5090 now. And
Is
5090
that what
last I
it is?
checked is something like $2,000. I mean, I'm cheapo, but I'm never gonna spend $2,000 on a video
No,
card.
not too cheap.
Not
it's
unless
like
I figure out some ways to actually meaningfully incorporate AI into my life, and then maybe I can justify it, but not for playing games.
Yeah.
it's just like a reverse Jevons paradox.
The what?
Jevons paradox.
Jevons paradox. I never heard of that one.
It's when use of some resource becomes more efficient,
Oh,
and
yeah, okay.
paradoxically increases demand.
I'm familiar with the concept. I just didn't remember the name.
It's $2,000 for a 5090.
Mm-hmm.
It takes
Easily.
400 watts.
Yep. Have you seen
Right,
the
to get the-
size of the the
Yeah.
PSU that you get these days? It's important. You're not
Like,
seeing some freaking. I have a lower end PC sitting right there, and it's a space heater in the winter.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I was thinking as you that now we have a way to keep women's feet warm in the winter, right? We put the
Exactly.
PC on your desk. Jesus, I just couldn't do that. I had a thing growing up. It would be different. It would be $500 today, but it's like if it's more than $200, it's not worth it. Right, that's a long time ago. But so today it'll be 500. I think it'll be $500 would probably be the way I look at it. But even the Radeons are 600 or 700.
Yeah, nobody wants those.
The GeForce is $1,000. What's wrong with the
AMD.
Radeons? What's
No,
wrong
I
with
mean it's just a butt joke, I guess. Even back in the '90s when Nvidia was at first it was 3D FX Voodoo or something. They were the rage because they were the first ones that came out with these cards, and then Nvidia started releasing theirs, considered the cheaper Taiwanese option. I think ATI Radeon also surfaced around that time. They were always okay, maybe not always, but the perceptions that they always lag a little bit, lagged Nvidia and lagged the state of the art. And I think, didn't AMD buy them or something? Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, probably nothing wrong with them. Just I've had experiences with one AMD CPU, and after that, I never looked at them again.
Mhm.
Probably perfectly fine. Okay, shall we? All right. Question 5 for Martin. Please deliberate on how New Age spirituality draws from pre-Abrahamic traditions, religions, and beliefs.
No, I'm no expert on it, but I gathered it's basically vibes-based in contrast to the dogma as basis of Abrahamism. There are also aspects of nature worship. I wouldn't say it draws from those older traditions so much as it organically converged with them because it's what comes to human, particularly women in this case, naturally.
I have to read that again. It's basically vibes based, yeah. Um, so it's the same argument I have that people have with the Western adoption of Buddhism. It's like they call it Buddhism, but what's underneath it is Christianity.
Mhm.
And I think that's the same thing with New Age
Really?
spiritualism. It's the same thing with heathenism. It's a different framework for expressing what are generally Christian ideas. So I don't know. I'm gonna see if I got any notes here. Um,
So it's like the same thing as Christianity. It's just not
well,
conveyed it like in the same tradition.
Christianity is really simple. It's the extension of kinship love to non-kin. And there's basically 4 rules to it, which I don't know if I can pull up, but my 4 rules are all over the fucking internet.
Well, sometimes you say 4, other times you say 5 or 6.
I think it's 5 actually. It's because I forget. There's 4 basic rules, and the 5th one isn't. If I've got, I don't know if I got a 6th one yet. But basically, it's it's the extension of kinship love to non-kin, right? And there's I don't know what the other ones are. It's called the oath. I think I've got it in the oath. You search for Curt Doolittle, the oath, you can find it. Um, so what have I got here though? Transmission menu. They don't take it. They take 4 transformations. Remove costly priestly hierarchical, right? They translate God, spirits, cosmology into states, archetypes, energies, and trauma. They universalize, perennialize that all traditions point to the same underlying truth. So mixing they can pull from multiple religions because the underlying truth is the same. And they deliver practices as purchasable modules. Is that true? I haven't seen that. Um, Pre-Abrahamic source streams. Yeah. I'll publish this. This is pretty good. You want to see it? I don't want to go through it all right now. New Age does not so much return to pre-Abrahamic religion as it extracts portable techniques and myth forms from pre-Abrahamic and non-Abrahamic sources, then re-encodes them into a more modern regime of individual choice, therapeutic aims, market distribution, and perennial legitimization. That's actually true. That's why the similarities are real, and the level of motif and at the level of motif and method, but discontinuous at the level of institution. Yeah, that's correct. I would agree with that. So it's the wrapper is different, but the underlying argument is basically the same. I prefer the initiatic brotherhood of soldiers, but I understand the feminine want of spirituality because suppress they're trying to suppress neuroticism, where men are trying to find allies.
I see a religion that doesn't make any real demands as pretty much useless.
Yes. Okay, I am not ready for the next one. Oh boy.
Okay. Let's see. Excellent. Question 6. What is the importance of the fine arts to Western civilization?
Can we do 7 first and then come back to 6 so I'm prepared? I have to pull up some of
All
my
right.
shit here.
I felt like we answered similar questions over and over again, but okay. 7. What are the analyzed disagreements with Richard Arion with respect to Constitution?
There is no description or link here. Richard appears to think we are actively invested in what he's doing, which is not the case. My interactions with Richard are constrained to reading his messages about how he disagrees with me and wanting to debate, while all I've seen is perspective I have or could have held maybe 5 years ago or more. So I don't know or remember what he claims about the Constitution.
I don't have anything. I don't know this guy, so.
He came to one of our conferences in Seattle. I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with him, but apparently Martin has more.
Well, I knew he was there, but I didn't interact with him then either.
Next question.
I love how brutal you are.
Okay, question 8. Is the concept of truth with respect to the science of cooperation really the truth? Or is it better to say that the truth with respect to the science of cooperation really an approximation of the truth that is enough for the purpose of cooperation? I feel like this is the case, but I haven't read or heard NLI teach it this way.
Truth is enough to make a decision in the given context and be responsible for it. While the association with cooperation often makes sense, truth can just as much be a reason to go to war.
It's actually very compressed, accurate, right? Let me read the question again. Okay, so the problem with this question, I'm gonna answer. The problem with the question is I don't know what he means by the truth. Most of the people think of the term ideal truth, which is if you are possessed of infinite knowledge, infinite understanding, and infinite due diligence, then whatever that truth would survive all those tests would be there. But that doesn't ever exist. So there's only we are stuck with the truths that we can demonstrate. And so it's like intelligence versus demonstrated intelligence. There's truth and there's demonstrated truth. Well, one is an abstract, and one is concrete. And so, as Martin is saying here, our work is to eliminate ignorance, error, bias, and deceit sufficient to make a decision in the given context and be responsible and liable for it. While I think that what Martin goes on to say is truth can be a reason to go to war, but going to war is still a matter of cooperation with your in-group. So, I mean, my view of this would be if there's no cooperation involved, in other words, if there's no testimony to be made, is it a matter of truth? Because that's what truth means. It literally means your word is as strong as an oak, right? That's what it means. And so I'm not sure the word truth matters outside of promise, right? Whereas I think that if you make a decision on your own, um, you're that's simply decidability, not necessarily truth. So you can achieve decidability without having to testify to it. I think that's one of the things we have done that doesn't always come across, is that we have separated testimony from decidability. And this allows us to not be trapped in the problem of conflating the two. So when we say true, we are saying it's how testifiable is it? And there's category layers. There's different degrees of testifiability. Ideal truth isn't testifiable, so we view that as the upper failure point. And if we can testify to it, then it's a matter of whether it's decidable. If it's decidable, the question is whether it satisfies demand for infallibility in the context in question. So basically, Martin's correct here, because if it's a public speech and it is the context of others, which is truth, then are you willing to be accountable for it, responsible and liable? So Martin's correct.
My point about war was rather that life is inherently a competition for scarce resources. Sometimes you can prevent it or at least put it off by lying, whereas being honest about it makes it necessary.
Yep.
Curt, are you ready to revisit the fine art question?
That's what I'm thinking.
That was
Because it's a
actually
really great question. I won't fuck it up.
the question about the truth was my question. I was thinking about the ideal truth, and you cleared that up really well.
Thank you. Well, it was a good question.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Technically, what we do is called performative truth. It's this field, the domain of truth. So it's when you say something is true, you're testifying that's the case. There's analytic truth, like 3 equals 3, right? Yeah. Or 1 plus 1 equals 2. Those are analytic truths. There's tautological truth, which is saying the same thing 2 ways. There's truth that you have done due diligence on, right, which is testifiable truth. There is truthfulness in the sense that you have not done due diligence, but you're being honest about it. And I think I have like 8 different categories in there altogether. 6 or 8 different categories, but we go from honesty to tautology, or in honesty to ideal truth, and we sort of separate those different things. But the only one that really matters is performative truth, because basically you're saying, whenever you say, you're making a truth claim, it says, I promise that is the prefix to the sentence. Is true means I promise it's true. And the problem is people avoid liability whenever possible, so they try to claim things are true without taking on the liability of doing so. All right. So do we give you the answer you wanted, Charles? There.
Yeah.
Great.
I just don't know like all the different kinds of truth, I guess. But like, I have to wait until like everything is released to the finished.
No, with this stuff I did back in like 2013 or something. So that's all up there. You just got to search for it.
Okay.
And if you just send me a PM or somewhere, I'll just do it for you.
Okay.
All right. So the question of the importance of the art in Western civilization. Okay, boy, this is a really interesting one. I feel like I'm going to steal the whole fucking show if I do this one.
Well, do it, because I'm interested to learn what's the difference between fine art versus just art overall.
Yeah, a constructive argument is not easy to make. All right, so there's sort of two different ends. Why do people make marks? In other words, why do people do paintings in caves? Why do they put adornment on themselves? And the opposite end is why do civilizations produce art, in particular costly art, what we would call monumental art? And the answer is related to how valuable, how important are the commons as a statement of our group's validity, success, superiority, whatever. Basically a status thing. So you have status, you have information transmission, you have the degree of investment in the commons we all need to make, and then you have the personal gratitude uh, of decoration, and you have the artisan's self-image and status by his creativity with materials, largely. And so there's a lot of dimensions in there that are actually being activated. But in the way to look at those dimensions in a bucket is its civilizational infrastructure. It's basically a way of, just as we've used words and religion to bind people to a particular thing, set of ideas, monuments assist in not only binding people together, but in binding people to a territory. In other words, when you improve a territory, specifically with monuments, not only with infrastructure, but with civilizational infrastructure like monuments, you are uh, you are laying claim to it and making a value statement about it. So, and this does affect people. I mean, you would say, well, the pyramids, we live closer to Cleopatra than Cleopatra did to the construction of the pyramids, right? And what has been the return on the pyramids, right? What's the return on the the construct of Rome? Uh, what has been the return on the cathedrals in Europe? What's been return on the arts and letters for you? Why did the Greeks not use the play as religion? The Greeks did. To some degree, the way we practice church is the way the Greeks designed the plays. In other words, that's how the Westerners practiced their religion before they had churches. Right? This is a civic celebration, and the plays were mostly lessons. The cathedrals, with all their sculptures, were designed for pre-literate people to be reminded of the mythos it lasted. Um, we have the art. We have sculpture. We have paintings. We have architecture. All of these. We have books. We have music. We have. I mean, the argument is basically all art is a derivation of architecture, or architecture is the highest expression of art, and not just any building, any construct, and that all the rest of the arts are means of decorating the architecture. And the architecture is, if you go back to the cave paintings, etc., it's a way to say this is our space, or this is a safe space. Um, so the production of art is civilizational infrastructure that satisfies a broad range of human needs in combating what we would call alienation and producing integration with people, and to do so by experiential means that are readily accessible to all people who participate in a way that rational argument is not. So that we're really doing is every group develops a group evolutionary strategy, and they create arts to celebrate that strategy. Or in the case of the post-war Marxists, they try to denigrate art in order to destroy that group strategy, which is what they did. Yes, I'm a student of this crap, so I'm sorry. It's fucking I hate what they try to do. So what have I got a list here? Memory and transmission, training, perception and attention, cognitive discipline, shared standards, right? Legitimacy and sovereignty, visible proof of order and membership, moral technology, simulation of choices, and innovation pressure, the competitive search for means of expression that that continuously improve the value and perceived value of the arts. In the fine arts, they become primarily status signaling, propaganda, and monetized novelty. And in general, see if I can find anything else here. Western civilization's fine art made its ideals visible: dignity, proportion, tragedy, heroism, and restraint. Um, I usually um, I usually contrast this. I don't know where you are on this, uh, uh, Francis, but you know the human form is beautiful to the Greeks and the Romans. The human form is eschewed by the Muslims. The human form is somewhat thought to be imperfect by the East Asians.
I don't know if imperfect is
Is
the
the right
word.
word.
I
Yeah.
think looking at Eastern Asian art, okay, first of all, you never see any naked bodies in East Asian art other than if it's for pornographic reasons,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And even then, like almost none of them survives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you see East Asian drawings, ancient drawings, is almost always with some kind of clothing.
Mhm.
And even the scantily clad, like immortal, what do they call them? The divine figures and so on,
Right. Right.
tend to
Right.
have tons of these ribbons and so on to accentuate it. And I wouldn't say that I'm a student of art overall, because it just kind of runs counter to my natural propensities. But from what little I've gathered, it's a reflection, more or less, on how the civilization views human overall.
Correct.
That and when you look at the human figures in East Asian fine arts, they're almost always interchangeable in a way, right? Especially in a group setting, i.e., you have multiple figures. They're almost always interchangeable. You can't tell who's who, and so on. The only times when you see specifically that this is for this person or this is for that, it's some deity. Like, for example, I remember seeing portraits, like whole body portraits of this god that's supposed to be the let's see, what is he? Like he's supposed to be the god that deters demons from entering your house.
Yes.
Or even a general from back in the Romance of Three Kingdoms period, who later the better Southern Chinese deified. You know, if you go to a Chinese restaurant, you typically sometimes you see a altar, and then there's a guy with a essentially a halberd there, and he became a deity, but he was a person. And of course, like all of these figures are clad either in, you know, for women, female figures, it's the whispery, what do you call them? The robes and whispery ribbons and so on. Yep. And then for men, it's especially for martial men, right? Just to distinguish from all other martial men, is usually with some kind of weapon and armor and so on. So I guess, come to think of it, in a sense, it essentially is more about the station and the role of the person through their clothing in the arts and accessories in arts than the person themselves.
So the other aspect is white space.
What do you mean?
So I like to contrast Hindu art.
Oh, yes. The other, yes.
Chinese art.
In Chinese watercolor, you have tons of white space for you to, essentially for you to fill in. Or actually, it's probably more there to contrast with the with either the figure or the landscape itself.
Exactly. But it's not there's a lot of Western art has to do with the Olympics? The Olympics. The whole the cult of fitness, right? And it derives from that. And then the body as beautiful. Whereas I find that the lack of that in other cultures somewhat disturbing. And I'm not really sure. I know why it happens, but I view it as an expression of heroism. And anyway, I don't want to spend the whole fucking day on this thing, which I probably could. But it's such a good question. I don't want to denigrate it by not giving a pretty clear answer. But basically, art groups develop strategies, group evolutionary strategies. We could consider all the arts, right? All the arts and letters as means of transmission. And just like the formal institutions, like the military and the state and the whatever religion or philosophy and the law or the commerce, we could consider those things as formal, and we could consider the arts semi-formal, and we could consider the culture to be informal forms of capital that all of us rely upon. I think that, as Francis just illustrated, it's when you get into it's a lot easier to talk about art or any matter of civilization if you do it through comparative civilization instead of looking at your own with magnifying glasses. It's usually better to understand it, your group's strategy and its arts and letters in the context of others, so that you understand what your group is trying to accomplish and why. Um, anyway,
I think
Right.
looking at from that angle, the well, I won't speak to all Far East Asian, even though they seem to be pretty similar, and a lot of them originally from Chinese art. But the way that the Chinese art is portrayed, it's more about the system and the institutions rather than the individual.
yes.
It's the monuments particles somewhat relate to what clicked into place for me about economics. That economics is about how to incentivize production, and surplus allocation is a political problem. And they instead treat it as one and the same thing.
Yes. Well done.
Because they basically leave the surplus to the people, who then often waste it on something like status signaling, a competition arms race.
Yeah. The thing is, Martin, is that people can be easily led by that method, right? Whereas if you don't provide all this infrastructure, they're very likely to go their own way instead of the collective way. So how do you deal with that?
Well, you leave them just enough surplus to still be incentivized to produce, but then allocate it to the commons.
Agreed. My view is that even now that when they're talking about there's going to be a retrenchment of the economy, I'm like, great, we don't need any more consumption. What we need is capitalization. And so I welcome it, because what happens when you don't have an economy but you have wealth is that you can produce direct people to the production of commons.
I also think many resources that have strategic value are being undervalued because
Yes.
we're only considering the present or the near future. We're ignoring what happens if they are not around for future generations.
Yep. Yep. Okay, what's next?
All right, question 9.
By the way, I'm going to write something about the arts and I'll put it up later today.
Question 9. How do the varying degrees of sub-urbanization impact that degree to which the community or individual can exercise responsibility? I.e., where do different sized suburbs fit along the rural, conservative versus urban, liberal axis?
I can't speak to those details, but suburbs were a Jewish project to profit from wide escape-driven diversity without really letting them have collective self-determination that an organic community develops. So on a genetic level, the capacity for responsibility is probably there. The environment prevents the expression.
I don't know where this comes from. I don't doubt it if you've looked into it, but I don't know if I studied suburbs.
No, there aren't any community centers. It's just a bunch of identical houses and roads for moving around with a car.
Yeah. I just view it as a profit motive. Yeah.
Without letting them have collective.
Well, I mean, we know why. So
self-determination.
we know why they developed, right? We had people who had lived on farms and people who lived in cities. They went to war. They saw Europe and they endured stressors. So they came back and they had the opportunity for privacy, the opportunity for cars, and the opportunity for self determination of the family. So basically they were able to move up a class structure with the capacity of transportation and home ownership. And so they built suburbs and are really a product of the post-war period. Um, uh, I'm looking for else here. Yeah, and then of course the government did VA loans, right? FHA and VA loans to make it possible. And I lived in one when I was a little kid. I lived in one of those, 1950s, like early nine. I think my house was built in 1960. Um, what they called national homes. They would just put up 50 of them in a neighborhood, right? An artificial neighborhood. That was a great place to grow up. Um, they weaken organic community. I don't know if that's true. They you are do they weaken organic community? Yes. If you look at most of the world that is intergenerationally dependent, you get they are more integrated than people who are atomized by home ownership. And yes, if you study the history of cities, there tends to be quite a bit of camaraderie there, and there tends to be the history of farmers. There's a lot of camaraderie there, and suburbs basically give you privacy and domain that allows you freedom from those kind of social belongings. Okay, that's all of that's true. Okay, I can go with that.
Yeah, too much privacy leads to atomization.
Yeah, but it's the whole thing of what we've done with the mass availability of continuous media is we've made it so that entertainment doesn't require compromise and consideration with other people, right? I mean, it's true. I mean, it's the bowling alone thing is true. I notice in my family's history, they call this lesser aristocracy. I always think that's a little overstating it, but there are people in the Anglo tradition who are members of the business community or some other social thing, and they participate in the governing of the town. And those people have been pushed out by bureaucrats with less noble incentives. And and so I think about that impact, how much that impact is visible to me today versus in my father's day when it was mostly the business people that got together and ran the town. My father was my father was a politician, minor politician, and I used to go to those meetings, and I was impressed at how well the things were run. Yet, if I look at the town I used to live in Connecticut, and I sit in on the bureaucratic meetings, which because they're televised today, it's actually intellectually offensive at what's going on there. Um, and so I don't. There's a. How do I get to this? There's a lot of breakdown that's happened, that's occurred, and I wonder. I don't know, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time finding my words today. But there's a lot of breakdown that's resulting from what we've done. I don't know. I mean, some sort of Jewish project. Um, well, in the sense that a lot of financiers, sure, but I mean, the objective was to bring. Here's the real objective. Here's how what they said at the time. The only thing more dangerous than sending your soldiers off to war is letting them come home, because soldiers who go off to war tend to have other nasty habits when they come home, and they're really dangerous. So the way you bring all those people home, and there was millions of them, right, is little pink, what they call little pink houses. So they built houses and cars and loans, and they built the whole financial structure to basically give these people, a home, and somewhat to reward them, but also to complete the conversion from farming to industry, right, and from industry to office or clerical work. So it was done for the it was done for ethical, moral reasons, wise reasons. But is it true that people took advantage of it? Absolutely. Okay, where are we now?
I just don't know if it's specifically Jewish project. Like, how do you define that it's a Jewish project, right? I think there's the the danger of attributing everything. There's just as much danger to attribute everything to Jews than there is at ignoring the Jewish influence.
Right.
I shared article in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay.
Which chat? This one?
Both.
All right. I'll need to look into that.
I will look at that. Thank you, Martin.
All right. We got time for one more.
Sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Question 10. Why are there so many Southeast Asian races?
I don't understand the question. The populations diverge as many times as there is any reproductive separation, geographic or otherwise. Should there have been some authority that said, all right, guys, that's enough races already. You're not allowed to make any more.
So what I'm trying to refer to with this question is like the genealogy of the human races, which is an article that I found on the website. If you remember what that is.
Oh yeah, I mean I've done a lot of work on this, so I just don't.
Yeah,
It's
so like
basically
that's what I'm trying to question. Is like how do you
Right.
classify
Okay.
races? Because
How do you-
like supposedly there's like all the African genetic diversity, but there's only like 10 races, 10 African races. But there's probably less genetic diversity in Southeast Asia than there is for Africa. But there's so much more like speciation in Southeast Asia
yeah,
than in
I mean,
Africa.
Can we read the next question and answer it together? And
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. I'm just going to read the next question very quickly. So, if Africans have the greatest amount of genetic diversity by far, what accounts for the fact that they have so few subraces according to the classification of the NLI?
their genetic diversity is caused by not passing through the genetic bottleneck Eurasians pass through. As a large part of the genome has no effect on the phenotype, and the rest, I suspect, is on something like a Pareto distribution, i.e. a few genes having much more effect than most others. So this genetic diversity in Africans doesn't actually translate into phenotypical diversity, but it's present where there was the least selection pressure to converge.
very good. Very good, Martin. So Martin touched on all of it. The basic thing that this ignores is that, in other words, that Martin's correct. The basic thing that produces such human variation is neotenic evolution, and neotenic evolution was very difficult in Africa. because what happened in Africa over thousands, millions of years, is the habitable range did this up and down across Africa. So people were already always moving. Um, Humans went through a couple of very severe bottlenecks too long ago, and then out of Africa happens roughly contemporaneously with that. What we get outside of Africa is basically 4 or 5 speciation events. And so when I talk about the groups, I talk about them in terms of the speciation events and the degree of neoteny captured by that speciation event. So if we start out of Africa, we go to the Persian Gulf. We go to the Persian Gulf first, but that's because that's where the first speciation event happened. But what really occurred is that people followed the coastline down into the Australasia and Australia, right? They followed that coastline. So there's one gradient path, right? Then there's the path that produces what we think of as the East Asians, and that goes I don't know which direction you're seeing my hand move. I'm in my mind I'm moving from east to west, right? East to west, west to east, west to east.
Yeah, I mean, remember the mirror, the video was mirrored, so.
Yeah, sorry. And so what you get is the population appears to go up, follow up the river. What's the river? In India, it's in the
Ganges?
Right? The Indus, and then over the top through the steppe and down into East Asia produces the 4 Asians and the most neoteny. Then those people are so fucking successful. People think white people are successful, but we used sailboats to get there. But if you want to look at a race that's successful, I mean, Asians are successful. They're fucking
certainly by numbers.
Certainly by numbers.
Although whether Far East Asians survives the Industrial Revolution and the what is it, the birth crisis, that's another question. I think historians, if there's such thing in 1,000 years, will have the interesting field study about this.
So then they're so successful that they go down, right, along the coast into the same path that the previous African explosion had come out of. And then there's the people who were in the Persian Gulf area, and they go both directions. They go into Iran and then down. And then they also go west into what we think of as the Caucasus, and north up into the
steppes.
Fucking steppes.
The stance.
Fucking
Yes.
Fucking nightmare up there. I have no idea why anybody would make that fucking choice, other than at the time it must have been full of roving animals, right?
Probably.
Right, and then the Europeans have a similar thing, is that they have a wave that comes out of this westward expansion, and then what happens is the ice age comes down. We get some isolation and further speciation. By the time the ice age is over with, the 4 populations are as different as whites, East Asians, and Africans. They're very different. But what happens in the old world happens in that Southeast Asia, is you have what sort of people don't think about this, but if you look at people in India, even though they're a cline of of two generations of people who went through India, the original Dravidians, which are sort of more Africanized, and the Indo-Europeans, who are just the opposite. There is a relative degree of genetic homogeneity in their physical adaptation, which I find fascinating. Right. But if you go into Europe, you got quite a bit of genetic diversity because the regions were allowed to specialize a little bit. But this is even exemplified more in the geography and the climate of Southeast Asia. And so you got local variation, which was pretty intense. So you had basically multiple migration paths of different degrees of neoteny and pools. You had essentially racial admixture between the first people through and then the Asiatics that come through, and then lastly, whatever the third group is coming through. And this plays out down in this arc from South Eurasia all the way to Africa. Like if you got not Africa, all the way to Australia. Like if you look at Africa, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry to say this, but those are scary, fucking ugly people. They even lost fire for a while.
Oh, yeah, the Australian Aborigines.
Yeah, I mean that's just they're scary. So I mean, there's a real ugly. Wow. And so, but if you look at the climb that goes back up that curve, it looks like an admixture of these three different or more different populations at different densities. And so between it's sort of like it's a funnel, right? So between the different branches of human evolution and the geography and time, we got quite a bit of variation in that part of the world. It's the same thing we have in the Balkans in the West. We have what we call Old Europe, but it's like that for the same reason. There's a lot of variation there. So does that answer the question? Did I get there? Did I answer the question?
You answer question 10, which is the Southeast Asian races. The African
Right.
one, come to think of it, when you talk about the ice ages, I think we've been focusing more on the ice, is it the ice plates or the mile high of ice coming down from the north. Well, what happened to the global south? I mean, wouldn't they have a mirroring effect in, say, the tip of Africa and South America and so on? You get this compression effect from both the north and south, or is it more one-sided? Because everything I read about it, they're talking about the ice coming down from the north, covering much of North America and Asia and so on. Very little focus on the global south.
You don't get selection pressure. I mean, the argument's always, I mean, as long as I've been alive, and I mean, I've heard attacks on it in support of it, but the argument is that you need in order to have speciation, you need isolation, right? And Africa doesn't have it, right? I mean, the south of Africa is actually shit, right? It's basically this bit in the middle that's good.
Well, South Africa is actually a pretty nice place.
Yeah, but there was nobody down there.
Sure.
Until the white people sort of domesticated it, it was really almost nobody down there. So you really have this band in the middle, and during the past 75,000 years, the climate hasn't moved that much. I mean, you've had increase in desertification, but that's mostly it.
When was Bantu?
Go ahead, Martin.
Just asking, when was Bantu expansion?
It's much more recent, right? The 1800s or 1700s?
I don't, it's something to do with cows. When was the Ben expansion? It was between 4000 BC and 500 CE. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's really they come out of because the Africa has this bulge to the left and the bulge to the south, right? And so they come out of this crux just around the edge there.
I
And they
clearly don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it is 4
Yeah,
to 5,000 BC.
it was more phenotypically diverse than like Khoisans and whoever the others are.
Yes.
Pygmies were probably never relevant, I assume.
They developed so the industrial revolution, the agrarian revolution starts around 10,000 BC, right? So it spreads, so it gets into Africa, and the Bantus are successful with it. I have it in my head that there was cattle, but I might be confusing them. No. Final consolidation was by the year 1. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, basically they genocided most of the other African populations.
They did. They did. Just like I always think they're peaceful American Indians. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's at least 2 major waves of you people, and this if we and probably I think it looks like 3, but say at least 2 major waves. The second wave all but genocided the first. All right, so yeah, you're peaceful, all right. And the same thing for the West. I mean, doesn't look like the farmers tried to genocide the European hunter gatherers, but in the end, the steppe people did genocide the farmers and the hunter gatherers. At least the males, they did, in a pretty strong climb.
Well, I mean, if you look at nature, how nature actually works, the Homo sapiens genocided all the other Homo species, whether by converting their habitat into habitat of our choosing or just waging wars or whatnot. There's a reason why there's only Homo sapiens left, not Homo neanderthals or Homo denisovans. And
well, they also kept some of the women, which
yeah, I'm sure.
really, how desperate you are if you take Neanderthal women.
I don't know whether the Neanderthals in modern human blood came from the female side of the Neanderthals or from the male side of the Neanderthals. Because
I don't know.
Everything I read, the Neanderthals are supposed to be stronger and bigger than sapiens.
Yeah, that's sapiens were smarter. They didn't just fight close range.
True. We're the only species capable of killing at distance.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, any place there are multiple paths, right? Like even India. I mean, any place there's multiple migration paths for different for groups with increasing neotenic evolution, you get 2 things. You get variation and hybridization, right? Variation, in other words, the 2 groups are different, and then you get some intersubspecies reproduction. And so, and then since if the geography allows for isolation, you will get further subspeciation. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's just, for me, it's all I had to understand was the pathways these things took. The only one I was stuck on for a while was did the people who started out as the Yamnaya, the Indo-Europeans, did they go the left way around, counterclockwise around the Black Sea, or did they go clockwise around the Black Sea? Answer's both, but it seemed to me that they had gone counterclockwise around the Black Sea. And that's how they got into Anatolia. But apparently they went both directions, which doesn't make sense to me because the Caucasus Mountains are inhospitable to get through.
the mystery to me is how did the early people, i.e., my ancestors, got from the Indus Valley into the Tibetan plateau and all the way to modern heartland China? Because not only if you look at the
That's
map, but
great.
I've been to that part of the world. Yes, there are some river valleys that are 500 meter or even 1,000 meters above sea level. That's more subtropical weather. But that whole region is just so treacherous to navigate and so on. It's like you got to be on a straight and narrow to even navigate some of those places.
You got the most neotenous people for a reason, brother. You better get along if you're going to be in those circumstances. I suspect that it's just like everything that went up north is those animals had not, the herd animals had not had experience with humans. And so they were relatively easy prey. And that was what drove the expansion was the animals.
Yeah, but down in those river valleys, like if you've been there, it's a very fragile ecosystem. I mean, you could eat a species, the only species, like you could eat them to extinction within like a decade or something, because there's not a lot of space, a lot of habitat for those animals to live out in that part of the world.
Yeah, we might find out that my understanding is that's the majority of the genetic contribution. It's actually on the northern route. But we might find out in the future that the southern route was actually the seed of all this stuff. I don't know, but when you're talking about how to get to China, the Chinese coastline from the Fertile Crescent, so to speak, just think about it as the Persian Gulf, because that's the axis. When you're trying to get over there, all right, and you're following rivers, you follow the Indus up there. That makes sense to me. But as you say, that's pretty rough territory up there, right? You're at high altitude. It's rough territory.
There are selected places for high altitude you have to pass through. If you just look at the two river systems, you follow up the Indus, you get into Tibet, and there's a place in Tibet, probably modern, between Tibet and Sichuan or whatever, where you connect the root of Indus River to the root of a Long River and so on, and Yellow River. I've been to that place, and that's average like 3,000 meters above elevation. But it's relatively short, only relatively. So still, you need to pass through those areas before you get to the fertile Sichuan Basin.
Yeah. Well, it's like, the selection pressure for neoteny is usually living in the cold and close proximity. That's usually what does it, right? So I'm thinking, like occipital folds, I mean, that's just a retention. That's a neotenic trait, right? It's just retention of a natural occurrence in the human genetic development. So, I mean, why was it so aggressive there? I don't know. I just know that it turned out to produce a fucking advantage that's pretty hard to defeat. Because, I mean, after that event, East Asians just went counterclockwise north, clockwise south, and then north and then clockwise into the Americas. I mean, and it was very successful. I mean, the East Asians pushed the North Eurasians, which are now basically gone. They pushed the North Eurasians west.
The North Eurasians.
That's why the Finns have some Eastern European genetics. It's from the male side.
East Asian.
What did I say?
You said East European.
East Eurasian.
No, the Finnish have East Asian. Yes, thank you. Genetics. It's not huge. It's for the male side, but it looks like it happened up there around the Ob River, really the far north. So, I mean, the East Asians are very successful. I don't know if we want to say that they're so successful that they made the ancient, the ancestral North Eurasians disappear, but it's possible.
All right. We're
All right.
over. I think this is a good note to end.
Yep. Sorry for the audience, but sorry I'm a little under the weather today.
You gotta sleep
Oh, my
more.
bad. I worked till like 11 last night.
Yes, I saw that. You're still posting.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. I really love you. Those are some great questions. I wish I was more up to speed today, but apologies. Martin, you were great today. Your answers were right on. Not that they aren't always, but I, want to call it out when they're exceptional. Francis, you're always a great leadership. Thank you so much. Charles, thanks for hanging out with us. Appreciate it. Always fun to have somebody visit with us. All right, so it's Francis, Martin, and me, Curt Doolittle for the National Institute. This has been our office hours Q&A for February 20th, 2026. Thank you for hanging out with us. Francis, you got anything you want to say to close it up? No?
What is it? Bell.
Do you have anything you want to
Ring
say to
bell,
close it?
subscribe or something.
Yes.
How does
All
Dr.
right.
Brett usually say?
Hit the bell so you get actually notified.
Yeah, when
Okay,
we're
guys,
not
love
being
y'all.
suppressed.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.